a thug video.
Hi, so today I'm going to talk about retro gaming. Retro gaming seems to be on the up. Just recently we've got the Sinclair Spectrum Vega and the recreated Spectrum. A mate of mine I was speaking to just earlier today saying about how they've just got hold of a Panasonic 3DO and they're ordering a Atari Lynx and a Sega Game Gear. All these old consoles and computers from days of yore. Why is it these things are popular? Because I've got, a relatively modern PC. There's some fantastic games out there, amazing graphics, amazing user interfaces, so easy to use. A lot of the games that you could get, for example, taking the Spectrum, a lot of them I just couldn't get to work. The interfaces were nonsensical, difficult to use, buggy. So why do people want to try these retro games? Well, for some of it, it's nostalgia. It's playing games that you remember from when you were a kid, and going back in time and showing kids what games used to be like. But it isn't just that. I think there's also a simplicity angle to it. So many Spectrum games, taking Spectrum games again, so many of them had 5 keys. Q, top left, A, just underneath it, OP over here, and space. Up, down, left, right, and fire. And it was really easy to pick up some games and just dive straight into them and start blasting away monsters. And some of the early consoles stuck with that. The NES, the Sega Master System. Simple controllers, couple of buttons with a sort of pointy thing, straightforward, like a joystick. Now, I was playing Call of Duty Advanced Warfare earlier, and it's got almost every button on the keyboard does something. You don't need to use all of them, but there's certain ones that you will use, and you certainly use a lot more than you'd have to on some of the older games. If you look at some of the current consoles, there are things like the PS3, Xbox. I've just avoided altogether because they look so complicated to use. You seem to need about 50 fingers to make them work. And it's interesting to see how that's changing. Look at the popularity of the Wii, for example, which has got this one sort of stick with a few buttons, and a lot of the control is just moving the control stick rather than actually pressing buttons. And the popularity of the Kinect system, where you become the controller and you're not actually having to press any controls at all, you're just moving your body around. So I think part of it is simplicity. Games were simpler because of the limitations of the hardware, but I think also a lot of games, particularly in the 80s, were produced by people in their back bedrooms, and it was one guy at a computer making a game, recording it onto cassettes and posting them out in jiffy bags, and which I love. I love that sort of homemade angle. But they wanted to get games done and out and them to be simple, and they were popular. Another sort of angle of it is when you look at mobile games, because mobile games, by necessity, are a lot simpler in your user interface wise than your PC games, for example. Typically, it's 1 or 2 fingers pressing on the screen, and whilst the games tend to be a little bit too simplistic when it comes to transferring those games onto a PC or onto a console, they're still very, very popular on phones and on tablets. And the simplicity of the user interface, I think, is a good thing. The user interface gets in the way of playing the game. Nobody wants to use a user interface. People want their spaceship to shoot the alien, or their gun to shoot the bad guy, or they want those 3 gems to line up and puff, and out you get a kitten that poos rainbows. you want these things to happen in the game because they're cool. What you're not bothered about is clicking the mouse or pressing the button to do it. I can see the argument for a more realistic user interface. For example, if, taking like the dance games that you can get on the Xbox and on the Wii, where you do the moves and you get scores depending on how good you replicate the dances on the screen. Or you might get, I think, as VR, this is Google Cardboard, which I love the idea of this. Again, I love the homemade idea of Google Cardboard. It's so simple, but it's great. I think with VR, as things like Oculus Rift comes, people will have more immersive user interfaces. But all of that is basically to get yourself closer to the experience. So you're not having to have you and then your environment and your screen. It's there and you're immersed in the environment. That's the difference. The keyboard and the mouse and the joystick and joypad and all these pieces of equipment only separate you from the environment that you're experiencing. And with a lot of the new and current systems, PC gaming and console gaming, that user interface has got more complex. And there's reasons for it to become more complex, but it is more complex and it does turn people off computer games. So I think a lot of people are trying retro games. Yes, it's a bit of a nostalgia walk down memory lane, but it is because they are accessible and fun, a lot of the games. And the other thing which I can see us going is through the mobile gaming and through the virtual reality future. I can see games having a lot wider audience. Suddenly people who's never been into games will get engaged in games. Things like doing exercising, gyms, running, these sort of sports activities. Suddenly you'll be able to measure your performance. You might be able to have virtual races with other people online. And there's all these fascinating possibilities which are coming our way. I'm really looking forward to seeing how gaming develops over the next 10 to 15 years. But also, it's going to be interesting to see how much of it kind of links back to the earlier gaming back, 30 years ago. Right, well, I've talked about gaming enough. Now I'm going to drink some Hoegaarden and eat some banoffee pie. Bye.